Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Practice of Being Human. Today, I have the pleasure of Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife joining me. She is a therapist, a coach, a wife, and a mom of three, along with many other things. And you will learn how wonderful she is as you listen to this episode. And I discovered Jennifer's work last year on Instagram and was really just immediately drawn in by her depth and breadth and groundedness of message. So today we get to explore belonging, identity, spirituality, marriage, and parenting. Just a few things. And what it means to create relationships that allow everyone in the room to become more fully themselves. And I believe this to be some of our holiest and deepest work as humans. Jennifer, I am so glad that you're here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure.
So, I want to start with the idea of belonging because it sits at the heart of my work with young adults, parents, and couples.
Mm.
And I guess what I would ask is when you hear the word belonging, what does it mean to you? And maybe not just emotionally, but also
Mm.
spiritually, developmentally.
Mm. Yeah, it's a very powerful word, really, which is, I think, from the first breath we take on this planet, there's yearning in it. The yearning to be in connection, to know we're not alone, to feel the safety of having others by our side. And so it's just fundamental to what it is to be human
Mhm.
is the pursuit of the solace of connection. And I think our spirituality is also very linked and related to that kind of yearning.
Mhm.
I think prayer is a kind of expression of yearning for connection to divinity, to something greater than ourselves, to something that both inspires us and anchors us in a world that's often scary, often dark, often uncertain. And so I think that yearning is just fundamental to who we are and something that our well being is highly connected to the quality of that belonging.
Mhm. Yes. And I know that you grew up LDS
Mhm.
and that faith was a very core part of your upbringing
Mhm.
and your formation as a woman.
Yeah.
How would you say, for those who are listening who might not be LDS, but who grew up in a faith, maybe some who didn't really explore that or it wasn't expressed in their family in a way that was deep and maybe wide, but how would you guide them on a faith journey wherever they are to say, going forward, this is what I have found to be most profound and beneficial and defining as I have walked this path of being human and in relationship?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I would say if I were to summarize my work in the Latter-day Saint community, it's both a lover and a critic of the faith. Like both are true. For me, that is that I see so much good of having been immersed in a faith tradition and also what the limitations can be of any faith tradition. Yet it is all, in a sense, an act of love, right? To be in that struggle sometimes. And whatever your faith tradition is, whatever culture or group that you come from, I think what I would say is that when we first start out, we're kind of immersed into a frame of meaning. And it's never a perfect frame, but I think many of us who grew up within a faith were often given the idea that maybe we even take for granted, but of a sense of a meaningful universe, that we're living in a world that has meaning in it
Mm-hmm.
and purpose in it.
Mm-hmm.
I know for myself, and I think for many others, I remember learning at a young age that there was a God who loved me,
Hmm.
who knew me and loved me. And that was a pretty powerful idea for me because it was like I didn't just have my parents or my family. or my neighborhood, that even when I was out doing things that were unfamiliar to me or were out of my depth, I carried this sense that there was a God that was aware of me
Mm,
and cared about me. I just think that was an important frame to kind of internalize. And then the idea that what I do matters, right? That loving others matters, that being honest matters, that, that I had impact on other people.
mhm,
And so I think those are pretty powerful beginning frames of reference because there's a lot of complexity in the world. And there's a lot of ideas that no matter what walk of life we're in or whatever family we're in, we're going to receive good messages and we're going to receive less than ideal messages for who we are. Even if our parents did the very best they could, no parent can just offer their child a seamless, perfect path to walk. So much of our spiritual development is coming up against the disconnection, coming up against the disillusionment, and so on. But I do think that sort of frame of you belong on this planet and you matter here and you're one of this larger collective
mhm.
is a powerful gift, that meaning, if one can receive it.
Oh my gosh, it's a gift. You're right. It's beautiful to have that in your bones, in your being.
Hmm.
I grew up Catholic, and a very strong message in my growing up was you're here to serve, you're here to make the
Hmm.
world a better place. However you go about doing that, it is about contribution and it is
Hmm.
about love. That was a very, very strong message. There were also a lot of, there's messiness to all of that, but it was so strong and so clear and it was
Yes.
modeled.
Yeah.
I think to even ask a young adult, why do you think you're here? Like, what is this all for? Because they haven't really gone to that place to ask that
Yeah.
question and to start to wonder and to really deeply excavate that. Like, why am I here? All of that is such an opportunity and such an opening, but it can
Yeah.
also be very overwhelming and scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in the culture of the last couple of decades, that's very information rich, but has had less of a sense of community
Mm,
and belonging.
mm,
And there's strengths in that too, because when you're too insular or too unaware of the larger world, you can develop ideas that are perhaps too tribal, too self serving. But on the other hand, I think many young adults have grown up in a world where they don't feel deeply anchored and deeply connected to a community
mm,
and feel more alone, feel more lonely, feel less clear about how to engage with other people.
mm, mhm,
And so while our information environment has been a gift in many ways, I think it's really that question of belonging and purpose and meaning,
mhm.
I think has been more challenging in some ways for people coming of age right now.
I think it's missing for sure. I think there's a
Mhm.
soulfulness to what you're talking about. And I think when
Mm.
you touch on that, even if people don't have that in their vernacular, they resonate. It's resonant for
Yeah.
people. And I think
Yeah.
that's the wisdom, that's the deeper knowing. And I think when
Yeah.
we touch on truth, we feel it. We feel it in our
Yes.
body. So even
Yes.
if you can't really wrap your arms around it fully, to even just know that is there. It's there's something I think
Yeah.
is promising for people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's been, just over the past several decades, less and less people that have been interested in religion. More and more people are not really identified. But I think there's been some slowing of that trend and maybe even some reversal of it
Mm,
because people are trying to find the best in faith. They're trying to find that sense of yearning for.
mm.
And it's very much linked to that sense of identity, purpose, belonging, and
Yes.
community. And I'm all for richer relationships with one another. It's so much what we need.
Well, you mentioned disillusionment earlier, and I think that is a large part. I even know for myself as growing up Catholic that there's a lot I love and there's a lot that I've wrestled with and I
Yeah.
continue to.
Yeah.
But you do come back to community. You do come to back to that sense of it's almost a container but you can push against that. It's like parenting being the sides of the pool, right? It's like you can push up against it, but you go back into the deep end and
Mm,
you learn, but you're learning what you believe. For me as a woman in the Catholic Church, and I think a lot of religions across the
mm,
board, as women, I think there is a bit of a pushing against because you feel this sense of this doesn't seem quite true. You said a word in one of the about benign patriarchy, and I was like, that's
yeah,
a great way of saying it because
yeah.
it's not a bashing of something that has been established and that there's a lot of good there, but there is also a lot to push against and question. Yeah, I think the questioning piece and being curious and asking, that just doesn't make sense. I don't really find as a woman that to be in a marriage, for instance, with my husband, where subservience isn't a thing. Like we're a partnership.
Yes.
We are fully each other's partner. And my parents didn't have as much of a traditional relationship either, so I grew up with that kind of modeling.
Mm, mm,
My mom was home full time, and we had 5 kids. It was a big family, and my dad.
mm,
But there was a sense of they were very much a team in that way. And
mm.
they both
Yeah,
carried
wonderful.
similar weight. But I don't think that's always the case. I think that is messaged differently in every family.
Yes.
I think religion in general can have, as you said, a lot of good to it. And I think you have to go through a little bit of that questioning and disillusionment if you're going to come back around in a wholehearted way to say, yeah, I really believe this and I like who I am when I believe this and I like how I show up in the world.
What I would say is a lot of the things I learned early on in my faith and about Christianity and a sense of what you do matters and right and wrong were the very same things that
Mm,
I use to say, wait, this doesn't feel right to me. Right. So that sort of foundational love and sense of connection and purpose, and that I'm beloved by God. Those were the very kind of messages that allowed me to say, is this a message that's really about love or is it more about fear? Is this really creating good in families, in marriages, in our own souls, or is this about something else? And I think even just that struggle with meaning, if we're really in pursuit of the good and really in pursuit of what is loving and fair and good for all of humanity, right? We find a solace and an anchor in that that's really valuable and really connected to our capacity for peace. But it doesn't mean being passive or just, I'll just go along with what someone else says necessarily. But it is a kind of earnest struggle with the question of what is good.
I love that earnest struggle. I think you distilled it, love and fear. And
Mm,
from where is
yeah.
this coming? Is it coming from fear or is it coming from love? And I think that goes into also, I talk a lot with my clients about values driven lives and living a values driven life.
Yes.
To even ask about values and what are they right now that maybe they didn't actually choose themselves, but similarly to what you've just said, I think the container of the family very
Mm,
much kind of sets the tone for that. But then I think
hmm.
you get to a place where you can start to question and ask,
Yes.
and decide and maybe shed some of the things that no longer
Yes.
are of
Exactly.
service. And
Like my one of my favorite Catholic theologians, Richard Rohr.
oh,
Yeah, isn't he amazing? Yeah.
I hope he lives forever, but I know he has had a lot of health issues.
Has he?
But
Yeah.
he's in his 70s,
Well,
so he's,
yeah.
but yes, he's
Well,
a
I've just really loved his work and his framing of that first half of life, that container. We build the container. It helps us in our ego development, that is to say, our soul development.
Mhm.
And then we come up against the ways that container is insufficient or disillusionment or whatever. And we experience that fall.
Yeah,
That's such a part of the divine pattern of our soul development.
right.
But now we have internalized these structures more and are more able to discern what is good, what is right, what is loving
Yeah,
in an imperfect reality, in an imperfect world. It's easy to look back and be like, that was so wrong. And I feel aggrieved, rather than maybe that is the way we grow through life. And those containers are always insufficient, but necessary. Mhm.
right. And he touches on the whole universal church, like universality of all of it. And I think
Yes.
the opening it to all of us comes back to love, right? And it also
Yeah.
plays into where I think we find ourselves as a society today, where there's so much division And I think a lot of fear mongering, just
Yes.
fear driving the bus.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we make good decisions from fear. We're human and we're these mammals who
Yes.
obviously are going to fall into survival
Yes.
strategies and modes. And I think about even in parenting, and I say this to parents, like when you're coming from fear with your children, which we all have it, but when that's driving the bus and not love, that
Yes.
it doesn't go well.
Right.
And it's felt energetically by your child, your
That's right.
adults. We all feel it. I think that's the other thing that comes to me is just this sense of divinity, but like that strong sense of energetic flow and
Mm,
love. We all feel
mm.
what love feels like. And love
Yeah,
doesn't have to
absolutely.
be, as you said, kind of the going along with things. It's sometimes saying no. Uh,
That's right.
and, it's interesting. You were mentioning something that I think segueing into it around choice, because I think choice is a big thing for all of us, but for young adults, especially who are
Yeah.
trying to decide, is this the right thing or the wrong thing? And I always say to them, you know, let's put right and wrong aside and let's
Hmm.
think about what is most aligned, like what
Yeah.
feels most true right now, and knowing that you might change your mind down the road,
Yeah.
that you reserve the right to change your mind, but what you
Right.
do know to be true right now, and in alignment with that, what would that look like in terms of what it is that really is drawing you in and your curiosities and your interests, because so many are trying to figure out what they want to do
Yes.
with their lives. And I just always say it's such an unfolding and it's such a discovery and it's
Yes.
a linear path,
Yes.
but it's,
Exactly.
yeah, it's
Well,
not.
absolutely. I do think the older I get and the more I kind of think about watching my own young adult children in that kind of discerning process and thinking about my own life and so on, is that when we're born onto this planet, we are born into a certain set of gifts and limitations, a body that is capable of some things, maybe less capable of other things, an environment that encourages some things, doesn't encourage other things. And that we kind of receive that reality. But then our agency, our self-authorship is really there, that once we've learned how to be on this planet a bit, be embodied, manage ourselves. Then the question is like, what am I going to do with these gifts? How am I going to relate to these strengths and limitations? How can I do good in the world? I mean, I really think that's ultimately what gives us the most joy,
Mhm,
is to feel like I can make a positive difference in my family, in my society,
mhm,
in the world. And so sorting out how to do that, I think sometimes we get in some perfectionistic idea, like there's some thing I'm supposed to do, there's a very, very clear thing I should be doing, as opposed to the creativity and the agency that's inherent to it, which is just kind of getting in there and sorting out what resonates with me. What is a problem I want to be connected to and invested in addressing?
mhm,
And we really only learn that by just trial and error. And I never would have thought in a million years when I was taking those tests in my high school about what my interests were,
mhm.
that I would ever be a sex therapist. I would have died. I think I would have been like, what is happening?
But of course, now, of course.
But it was just, I knew I
Yeah.
knew I loved the world of therapy. I was drawn to it. Eventually, I sorted out I really wanted to work with couples. And then when I was a graduate student, I was offered the chance to teach human sexuality. And it was about the time I was writing my dissertation. And
Mm,
I found through teaching those students these questions that were emerging for me around, you know, how do people relate to sexuality and how does it shape their marriages and shape their lives?
mm,
So my point is, it was just an unfolding, but it was happening as I was leaning towards things that mattered to me. And then that opened up other doors and other possibilities. And it's a very exciting time to be a young adult, but I also think it's a high anxiety time because there's a lot of uncertainty about who am I,
mm,
what is going to make me happy, who should I partner with, right?
mm,
There's just a lot, there's a lot of options, but that's also can be stressful because you're like, what if I walk through the wrong door and then I close off all these other possibilities? The way I think of it is there's a lot of ways to be happy, a lot of ways to make a difference in the world.
Mhm.
but it does require taking a step into the uncertainty.
That's right. And being able to pivot as needed,
Yes,
which I think
yes,
is important. It's interesting,
definitely.
as you were mentioning in high school, not having any idea that you would be a sex therapist someday, but I was just thinking about my senior year in college. So Father Michael Himes, so at Notre Dame, he left Notre Dame the year after I graduated and then went to
Mm,
BC
mm,
and taught this very course, but he talked about the three questions that we're all grappling with at that time
mm,
in our lives, but I think it's true across the board. But he
mm,
talks about what brings you joy, what are
mm.
you good at, but not just what you're good at, but what do other people tell you you're good at?
Yeah.
Because then that feeds into the third question, which is how can I do good? And
Mm,
really what he was saying is what is a need in the world that you can fill? Like,
yeah, right.
and I always love that because I think
Yeah,
there's a way of thinking about, okay, right, so what lights me up and
right.
am I really good at that? Maybe it requires work, but I want to do more and more of it because and I want to keep
Yeah.
learning it because that's I think the sweet spot. It's like you're good
Yes.
at something and you can't get enough of it, and then that leads you to
Yes.
something else and it might be along that same path or it could be very different or it could be kind of a hybrid
Yes. Yes.
as you so beautifully said, I think that's at least that's what I heard you
Yes. Yes, it is.
describe.
I just finished writing a book called That We Might Have Joy. It's a reference to an LDS scriptural passage that we might have joy, but it's very much about how we are in relationship to one another and specifically sexuality and marriage. But one of the things I write about a lot is eros. And what is eros love? What is eros energy? And it's more than just romantic connection, right? But it's this yearning for communion with mystery,
Hmm.
right? With what we don't yet know. And when I hear in what you're talking about is that passion
Hmm.
is like there's something that resonates with me. Like I want to figure it out. And even as I go into it further, my hunger for it grows. It's not a hunger that gets gratified, Eros hunger. It is actually the more you step into it, the more your yearning grows. So the yearning for goodness, the yearning for justice, the yearning for beauty, the yearning to solve a problem, to understand a problem. There's, it's like the Greeks said, is the life force.
Hmm.
And so when we touch that life energy, that life force, it expands our souls, it makes us more joyful.
Hmm.
And so it's really the desire to transcend our insular reality through the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of beauty, the pursuit of love. But it does mean stepping out into the unknown and trusting that process and not bringing our perfectionism and our judgment to it, but allowing it to teach us.
And having marriage as kind of that container, but relationship in general, I think can be that for us as
Mhm.
well, right?